welcome back everybody to our channel. It's Mark and Pat's real estate channel. Today we're going to take a different tack on everything. We're going to go ahead and let Pat kind of give us his perspective on the residential purchase agreement. So the RPA, the contract that we would put together for, putting a deal together. He's going to go ahead and go over all the pertinent points. We'll continue again next week with the, the chapters we left off on in the real estate principles book. But for today, we're going to go over the RPA. So Pat, how you doing this week, man? How's everything going?
I'm doing outstanding. It's been a busy week for me since we last talked, from last week to this week. I tend to work with a lot of buyers. As you're aware, for 12 years, I was kind of principal buyer and manager of a real estate corporation overseeing a lot of properties. So I would go in and identify key areas and properties, take care of them in those areas, and look for the inbound and then the outbound potential of those properties, right? Mm-hmm. So typically investors, they're not concerned only about what they're purchasing. They're looking at what they're going to be selling, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. My investors are more long players. They look at their properties as what we refer to as alternate 401k properties. They already have things set up in their work 401k. Now they're looking to make an alternate 401k play into a tangible asset that they can reach out and touch, such as a single family house or a duplex or a triplex, whatever it may be. So this week I've been working with some buyers in Los Angeles, and the LA marketplace is a little bit different than most. I always say about LA, there's safety in numbers in LA. So if there are 10 properties, you've got 1,000 buyers going after those, 10 on each property. So for example, I got countered on an offer yesterday where there were 12 buyers. And for example, on that particular deal, the price on that property was $800,000, and 5 of the 12 deals were all north of $900,000. So the properties are being bid up, bid up, bid up. And that property ultimately that I'm referring to, I would say it would sell somewhere between $925,000 and $975,000. So, basically $175,000 to $150,000 above their list price. So when you're competing as a buyer's agent, I thought it was really important this week that we talk about the RPA, because you need to know the ins and outs of the key provisions in the RPA, which is a residential purchase agreement. That's the document we use when we're purchasing properties. If you're listing a house, you would use the residential listing agreement. So you need to be aware of those provisions, and we can talk about those at a later date. The RPA, if you're a listing agent, is something you've got to be very familiar with, so you can advise your seller. And as a buyer, you need to be very intimately familiar with it, so you know what to explain to your buyers about each key provision. So what I wanted to do is bring it up. I won't go through every single line item of the RPA. That might take us a few hours, but I'll go through what I believe are the key provisions of the RPA, just so you can be brought up to speed on those key things, so that you can have a heightened sense of awareness when you're dealing with that document. So I will share my screen and we'll pull an RPA up and take a look at it.
Sounds good.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, I can. Looks good.
Okay, so at the very top here, can you see my cursor where it's moving? Yes? Mm-hmm. There's the purchase price right there. Okay, right above here is name and address of the property. We don't have to go through that information. There's seller's information, buyer's information there. But so at the very top over here, we have provision 2, which talks about agency. At the top of that will be the name and the address of the property. And over here, we have the price that we're going to submit at. Right below that, it says on D, close of escrow. In here, I've populated 30 days. So 30 days would be a very manageable deal to close a deal in. If we were going to put 45 days or 90 days or 60 days or even maybe sooner, 21 days. I close deals all the time with very savvy purchase-specific lenders in as short as 15 days, and in many cases, 21 days. If you had a cash deal, for example, non-financed, you could close in 7 days, 10 days, as quickly as you wanted to, as long as you did all of your inspections on time. But in this case, we've written it 1,025,000 on a 30-day close, okay? Down in the B section here, we have the agencies involved. My name is right here, and my agency is right here, and the listing agent is above. When we come down to provision 3 here, it's the financing. All the financing terms are netted out in 3A down through G, okay, which ultimately gets you down to the purchase price. But if we start at 3A, it's the initial deposit. Now, on all deals, you could open a deal with $100, but you wouldn't be giving the seller a whole lot of permanent security that you're a very solid buyer if you're only putting a $100 deposit to open escrow. If there's no money in escrow, you wouldn't have an escrow. The definition of an escrow is money in the deal. So in this particular case, the buyer is putting $25,000 down, okay? That's the amount of money that would go into the escrow to open the initial escrow. Okay, it's referred to as the initial deposit, or in the business is also referred to as an EMD, earnest money deposit.
Well, let me write that down.
You'll see that in your book mentioned a lot. It'll say EMD or earnest money deposit. The RPA calls out an initial deposit. And the contract in that section, in this situation, there's a lot of different things you could put in here, okay? It says at 3A1, buyer direct deposit shall deliver deposit directly to escrow by electronic funds, okay? That's the default for the contract, meaning that he's gonna wire the money into escrow if we reach mutual agreement with the seller. You could also check the box of cashier's check, personal check, or other, right? If you were gonna bring in royalties to a record, you would check there and write record royalties right there. Yeah. But
commonly nowadays, the way this is done is that mostly by electronic funds.
Yes, and the contract defaults that, and escrow prefers that. Why? There's a box there you could check about personal check. Well, a personal check could bounce, right?
Right.
For many years, we used to get a copy of the check, and we'd make a copy of it and send that to the listing agent day one, saying, "Here's my $25,000 check." But that's really meaningless, right? It doesn't mean anything. It's just a copy of a check. So if we say within, also at 3A1, it says within 3 business days. You see my cursor right there?
Mm-hmm.
So within 3 business days, that 25,000 goes into escrow. Now, if we go back up to 30 days here, that's the length of our contract, our escrow from beginning to close. Now, the first day of escrow starts the day after you reach mutual agreement. So if you and I were buying a buyer and a seller, if we reach mutual agreement today, the first contractual day would be tomorrow. But the key about the 25,000, it says 3 business days. So if we were to reach mutual agreement on a Thursday today, the first business day would be tomorrow. Saturday and Sunday are not business days, so they wouldn't count. So Monday would be the 2nd business day, Wednesday would be the 3rd business day. So that's when the money would be due to be wired to escrow.
You mean Tuesday would be the 3rd business day?
Correct. Did I say Wednesday?
Yeah.
I'll say, sorry, my misspeak there. Tuesday would be the 3rd day of the 3 business days.
Okay.
In that scenario, if we reach mutual agreement on a Thursday, then Friday and then Monday, Tuesday would be the business day, 3rd business day. So that's how that would work. And then if we scroll down here to the next provision, well, these other provisions are with regards to increasing deposit, which is a whole different scenario. If you had an all cash offer, if you weren't financing, you would check that box right there. And then the loan information is here. So in this case, on a $1,025,000 purchase, back up to the top here, $1,025,000, 820 represents 80% LTV, which is 80% loan to value. So in this scenario, the buyer is putting down 20%, financing 80. the 820 is the first loan on the property. So if we calculate, and if we scroll down further, balance of the down payment, 180 plus the 25 would equal 20%. And this contract is done on WIN forms in car forms, okay? And so.
What does CAR stand for?
California Association of Realtors.
Okay.
So when you join CAR, after you get fully licensed, you'll join the California Association of Realtors, and then you'll also have access to this website where you'll have all of the forms that you'll need to either list a house or sell a house.
Okay, I'm sorry. What was the A stand for again?
Association.
Association, okay.
Yeah. And so as you scroll all the way down, as we did, we showed the 25,000 initial deposit, we showed the 820, 80% LTV, and the balance of the purchase price, and then the total purchase price is referenced down below again. So that's the 80% plus the 20% to get us to that $1,025,000 initial offer. So that's page 1, which is pretty basic stuff. It's plug and play. And page 2 comes down to some key provisions in the contract. Starting at the top here, H, verification of down payment and closing costs. So we're writing an offer at 20% down, financing 80%. So there's a box here that shows verification. If I'm going to send verification, I'm going to send verification of the 20%, that my buyer has at least the 20% in the bank to do this deal. And you can share that with a seller by a letter from their personal banker stating, based on $1,025,000 purchase, my client has sufficient funds to close that deal. That would be recognized as a verification. Another verification method would be showing bank account that had 300,000 in it or 200 and something thousand in there based on the 20%. So that would be a verification. I nowadays don't tend to show that much, but the next, I'll get to what I do show in a minute. So, but if you want to really send over a strong contract with accompanying documents, you would send over a copy of the bank account showing where the money is, maybe with the account X'd out, black lined out, but you would show where the money is. Okay. And that provision would be checked at that point. The next provision here is a key provision, provision number I, which is on page 2, appraisal, contingency, and removal. Okay, this agreement, if you didn't want it, if you didn't want an appraisal, for example, the only reason you would do that potentially would be, not the only reason, but the main reason, if it would be a cash transaction. Then you wouldn't have to, you wouldn't be required to get an appraisal for the deal. But if you're financing a deal, you have to have an appraisal contingency in there because the bank is going to only lend 80% of the appraised value. So at $1,025,000, they're going to say, okay, the property has an appraisal contingency. We need to get it appraised for a minimum of $1,025,000 to lend you the 80% of the $125,000. Okay. Clear on that? Yeah. So if you had an all cash deal, an all cash buyer at $1,025,000, he may not care. He may say, I don't care if it appraises. I get a lot of skin in the game anyway. It's not necessary that I need an appraisal contingency. I know my agent shared properties within a 1 mile radius of this property with me. I believe the value is $1,025,000. So since I'm not borrowing money, I'm just trusting the comp data around this property to say I'm fine with that value. Okay. But if you're financing, you must have this in here. And the appraisal.
Comp data is comparison data, right? Around the different properties that mile radius?
That's correct. It's comparison data.
Okay.
So this I provision here says 17 days. It just says that the contract defaults to 17 days. Just says we're going to get this appraisal done within 17 days. And that's out of my control as an agent. The lender has to go to the AMC, which is an appraisal management company. They put the appraiser on task to go do the appraisal. and the appraiser goes out to the property. He'll pull comp data himself within a mile radius of that property, and up to 180 days. They like to look at within 1 mile on a residential property, and up to 180 days, which is 6 months prior. If it's more of a rural property, they may look up to 5 miles away to bring in data, if it's more of land somewhere.
Okay.
So, but here, so now a lot of days we have to put in 10 days here instead of 17. In that LA market, for example, I'm having to try and get appraisal done in 10 days a lot. I keep getting counter offers back. No, Patrick, 17 days too long. We want you to get appraisal done a lot quicker, so they'll counter me with 10 days. The next provision down here is the loan term. Loan application within 3 days. Well, you wouldn't want to write an offer and then have your buyer go try and procure a loan, meaning a pre-qualification. You'd already want to have this loan application done. So in that case, you see this little X down here?
Mm-hmm.
It just shows when I send this offer over, I'm going to send a lender pre-qualification letter stating he's already been pre-qualified for an 80% LTV loan. Okay. So if he's already done that, I'll check this box and I'll send that letter along with it.
So it's a way better scenario to be pre-qualified, obviously, right?
100%. You wouldn't be taken seriously by most agents if you said, "Oh no, my guy hasn't done pre-qual yet, but I think he's good. I think he has a good job, and I think he has money in the bank, and I think he had, and I think."
So where do you stand on having multiple pre-qualifications?
You don't need it. You as a buyer, strong buyer's agent, you're going to form a strong relationship with a good lending team. Okay. that vet your clients very well. And as long as, and you need to sell that to the listing agent that you've worked with this lender a lot. You've closed multiple deals with them. You've closed them in 21 days, 15 days. They can perform. They're a top shelf lender. They've got a great reputation, and that sort of thing, right? So you're gonna sell that to that agent. But like I've told you before, the trifecta, the 3 things of buying real estate: good credit, assets in the bank, and a job, right? Verifiable income. Mm-hmm. So if someone says to you, "Mark, I want to go buy a house," that's nice, but it's a trust but verify thing. Your first question is, "That's great. I'd love to help you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with you. Who are you working with as a lender?" And if they say, "Oh, I haven't even talked to a lender yet," say, "Okay, well, the first thing is this: there's a lot of houses on the market you can buy, but we don't know what you can afford yet. If you just told me you might want a house around 500,000 or 600,000, let's see if you can qualify for that." And then you'll turn them over to the lending team, and the lending team will ask them questions. How much do you plan on putting down? Well, I want to put down 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%, whatever it is. And then they'll qualify them based on that criteria.
Okay. But, yeah, so these are lenders that you are familiar with and you've worked with, and so you trust their business acumen.
100%. They don't pay me and I don't pay them. It's just that we have a long-term proven record. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of text messages because I get deals going. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, these are people, that you have a solid professional working arrangement with. They treat your clients the way you treat your clients. They get back to your client very quickly in a professional manner. They do a good job with them.
Pat, how long did it take you to get those kind of associations happening? I mean, did you have to go through a bunch of different lenders before you landed on the ones that you're working with currently?
Yes. I have 3 primary lenders that I work with on a purchase, okay? And they're all very purchase specific, meaning, if you do a refi on a house, those guys don't work quite as fast because they, that can be a 30-day deal, 40-day, 50-day deal. But when you're buying in a very competitive market like LA, and they want you to close a deal in 21 days or 30 days, you better know the lender you're working with and have a good relationship with them, and knowing they're going to stay on task and they have a solid team that they can get all the documents from your client in a timely manner. So that's why you want to do that work in advance of writing the contract. You don't want to be giving a loan application within 3 days of submitting an offer and thinking you're going to get an offer through. You'll be laughed out of town. There's not an agent in town that would take that deal, not knowing that your buyer would even hasn't had a lender look at them in a pre-qualification standpoint.
Okay.
So it'll take you time to form that relationship. You may say to me, Patrick, I've known you a long time. You've been in the business a long time. Who do you use? And then I'll say, Mark, you might want to talk to this lender. I've used them on all my purchases, and maybe they'll work with you also. They're always trying to form new relationships with agents. And you know, that's how you know, any new agent coming into the business that's working with a mentor would tend to work that way.
Okay.
You know, I have in my network, in my database, I've got vendors that I use for everything, from electricians, plumbers, carpenters, builders, flooring guys, everybody, movers, locksmiths. I have them all from past performance, right? You know, I've been in the business a long time, so I've got proven track record with these guys. I know if I pick up the phone, they'll show up, they'll do their job.
Okay.
So this loan application, you'd want to make sure that was done, right? Before you even submitted an offer, so you can submit that pre-qual along with this contract. So then it comes down to J2, which says loan contingency. So obviously your buyer, if he's buying 80% LTV, it's contingent upon him getting a loan. The same way it's contingent upon an appraisal on the property, right? The property appraising for $1,025,000, it's contingent upon that. So there's also a loan contingency, which is different than an appraisal contingency. Appraisal is a part of the loan, and it's like a part A and a part B. The loan contingency is full approval of the client, and a part of the client is the property he's buying and appraisal on that property. So the reason the loan contingency is, the appraisal contingency is 17 days, and the loan contingency here too is defaulted to 21 days down here, loan contingency removal, is because the underwriter has to get the appraisal back before you can get full loan contingency removal.
Okay.
He has to get that appraisal back at $1,025,000 because the bank is lending 80% of $1,025,000, and then you're able to remove the appraisal contingency and the loan contingency at day 21. If they let that slide, a lot of those loan contingencies nowadays have to be 10 days and 15 days or 17 days also on the competitive deals. The selling agent wants to make sure that buyer is super engaged and the whole team of the buying team is fully engaged in getting it done quickly.
Okay.
Those are the two biggest contingencies on this deal. Certainly if you have a loan in play. If it's all cash, obviously you don't have a loan contingency or an appraisal. You might still have appraisal contingency, maybe, but most of the time you wouldn't. Okay, so those are two key things. And the reason they're loan contingency removal, keep in mind, contracts are all performance and remedy driven. So on the loan contingency, it says 21 days. Used to be the 21 days would come and just fall off and that would be removed. Nowadays on real estate contracts, it's called active removal. If day 21 comes, the selling agent has to send me a notice saying, Patrick, remove your loan contingency. Now, once I remove that, I'm not making that loan a part of the deal, even though it is in the deal, right? It's now been removed. So I should have permanent security by day 21 that my buyer is going to get that loan.
Okay.
I have to remove that contingency. And the reason that's key is once all of my contingencies have been removed, inspection contingency, appraisal contingency, loan contingency, that initial $25,000 that's in escrow is out there and it's naked. Once all of those contingencies are removed, the seller, if my guy cannot get the loan, the seller can go after that $25,000.
Really?
Yes. That would be that would be a breach of contract. If he removed all of his contingencies and said he was going to go forward on the deal, and then he tried to pull out of the deal, remember, performance and remedy. Performance means 21 days to do this. Remedy would be, I remove the contingency as a buyer. The remedy for the seller, if I don't get the loan, is he's been materially hurt, right? He's had his property off the market in a backup position for 21 days, and no one's been seeing his house. So he would get to go after that money as a remedy.
That makes sense.
So those are two very key provisions. Number 4 would be no loan contingency if you just check that off if you didn't have if you had an all cash deal.
Okay.
If you had permanent security that he was going to get a loan, you might want to do that, but I would never do it if I had a loan in play.
Okay.
The rest of it, like 5 here, lender limits on buyer costs, it's all boilerplate that you can read at your own speed to go through this. And I recommend you read this contract very carefully and study it and know it, okay? But these things are not important in that sense to you. What I just went through with you, the appraisal contingency and full loan contingency and what that means and how that impacts the deal, those are the most important things.
Okay.
Same here with buyer stated financing. If you would, again, read through that provision and understand what that states. It's not applying to what we're talking about right in this situation. Now 4 here says sale of buyer's property, and it says car form COP, right? So if most people that buy a house, not all, but most people that are buying a house have something to sell, and then they're looking to buy something. That would be legging up, right? Called legging up. They're going up to, they might be selling a 2-bedroom condo, and now they're buying a 4-bedroom house. So they're legging up into a bigger property. So in that situation, if their house was on the market in escrow, and they're moving ahead with a buyer on their house, and now they're saying to me, Patrick, I want to go out now and try and find a replacement house, and I want to write a contract even though my 2-bedroom condo is not sold yet, but I'm in escrow and I'm through contingencies. I want to put in a contingent offer. So if that was the case, I would check that box at 4B, stating it's contingent upon him, closing his escrow to buy this property. He's a contingent buyer. So you understand that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
So they're waiting to sell their house so that they can buy the new house, basically. But everything's all on their selling. They're in escrow, so they're pretty much there.
Yeah, so they're pulling the bulk of their money to do the other deal, the 20%. They need that $200,000 out of that property in order to buy the next property. So they're contingent on selling their house.
Yeah,
that's not going to be all the buyers that you work with, but it will be a proportionate amount of them. I had this conversation with one of my LA clients yesterday who's moving down to Orange County. He told me, look, how would it work if I buy down there? Because I can buy up to $2 million. So, but I need to pull the money out of my house. And I explained to him how that contingent deal would work. We need to get your house on the market. It would serve us to get it on the market and to get a buyer engaged and get the buyer through all of their contingencies, so that when we put in a contingent offer, I can tell this listing agent on the property that you want to buy down by me that yes, he is contingent, but his property in LA is on the market. We're in escrow. We're out of contingencies. We're just waiting for it to close, and it's anticipated it's going to close in 10 days. And then he wants to ride on your property and close it in 20 days. So 10 days after he closes his LA deal, he'll buy your deal. Or we can close it concurrent. We can close it within a day of him closing his LA deal.
Okay.
So that's how a contingent offer would work. The 5 here, addenda and advisories, these are the things that you would include along with your offer. The BIA right here, buyer's inspection advisory, that's included in the deal, in the contract. The statewide buyer and advisory that we call it SBSA, That's just a 10-page document netting out all the potential pitfalls that you should be aware of as a buyer in buying property. So I'm just stating we're going to include both of these within this document, so make the buyer be aware of all of those things.
Okay.
Section 7 here talks about allocation of costs. This is a very important provisions right in here, 1, 2, and 3. One of the things that a seller gives to a buyer is this natural hazard zone disclosure report. We call it an NHD report. It just nets out all the things that are occurring around that location. Earthquake zones, flood zones, fire hazard zones, all of those things. It's a report that costs the seller around $100 to generate, but it's a good thing for a seller to give to a buyer, so a buyer is aware of all the natural hazards around that area. He could be in a high fire zone out in Laurel Canyon or Bucco Canyon or Malibu. You know, you would want to know that.
Are these mandatory?
Yes.
Okay.
The B here, seller shall pay for the following report, termite report, right? Now, you don't have to add that in there. You could, as a buyer, you can do all the reports you want. In this situation, this contract I wrote, I'm checking that box saying the seller shall pay for the following report, right? California termites are a part of selling houses. So if I put that in here, though, I'm letting everybody know that a termite report is engaged in this deal. So a lender might want to see that, and he might make that subject to getting the loan. So you just have to be careful what you're putting in here, because you're putting everybody on notice that these reports are out there and you might want to see them. They might want to see them. And I also said in this thing, city report. A lot of cities, not all cities, require that when you sell a property that you get a city report. I just see it as them picking up fees. Could be $100, could be $200, but it's something that some cities require.
Okay, what kind of information is in the city report?
City report would be, again, various zone disclosures. The biggest thing on city reports are any permits that have been pulled on a property.
Okay.
So they would show there, if you bought a house and you sort of had an addition and the seller said to you, yes, we permitted that, then that would show on a city report, and you could, trust but verify that.
Pat, what happens to a place where someone's trying to, maybe sell a house, and they've done some kind of, home improvements that weren't up to code, that weren't qualified that way? What happens with a house like that?
They're non-permitted. Well, they would disclose that to you. A seller gives you two disclosures. One is an SPQ, seller property questionnaire, and the second is a TDS, transfer disclosure statement. Mm-hmm. So they would note that on those disclosures, and your buyer would he'd be put on notice that that's the situation, and he'd have to be comfortable buying that property knowing that the addition or things that were done were not permitted or were maybe not up to code. He would have to, that's up to him to decide. You could advise him. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so
about 2 years ago, I had a 1.1 million deal go south because the seller did a non-permitted addition.
Hold on a second, I gotta close this window. It's making too much noise.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, so my seller told me he did this addition without pulling a permit, and I instantly told him that was a mistake, because now you've told me I have to disclose it to everybody, and you need to disclose it to everybody that you did this non-permitted addition. Now, some people may not find it to be a big deal. Other people may. Well, the buyer I had engaged was an all-cash buyer, and he had a problem with it because he was buying as an investment. He wasn't going to live there. And obviously as an investment, he was going to sell it himself one day. So he would have had to disclose that, or go to the city and pull a permit and smash into the walls to make sure the electric was done and make sure the footing was done correct. In my situation, it was a bigger deal because he pushed the footprint of the house out a little bit. So that changed the overall square footage by about 3 feet out. Wasn't a big deal. And he worked, and it was all done by a fully licensed and bonded contractor, but he didn't pull a permit, which would have cost him $300-400, which was just naive, short-sighted, because it cost him a deal.
Wow.
So, but if, maybe a different buyer would have been fine with it and said, oh, no big deal. I see all your receipts that you did it. I see the contractor that did it. I'm sure he did it fine, and he would have been fine with it. But it's a disclosure item, and you have to disclose it.
Okay, what happens if someone does that without disclosing it and you find out later on?
Then you could be in a lawsuit.
Oh, okay.
We are
in California, so that's going to happen.
Exactly. And like in real estate, and see, the reason this RPA now is a 10-page document, it used to be a 2-page document. It's now 10 pages because of lawsuits. Most of it is attorney boiler driven provisions in here, right? Trust but verify everything. And this used to be the most important 3 words in real estate were location, location, location. Nowadays it's disclosure, disclosure, disclosure.
That's a good one, Pat.
Yeah. Because, if you don't disclose, if he tells me something and I don't disclose it, now he's not only on the hook, but I'm on the hook.
Right.
If he tells me something, I'm saying, listen, Mr. Seller, you just told me something that I can tell you is going to be a big deal on this deal. I have to disclose it, even if you don't. I fully intend to put on my disclosure. An agent does what they refer to as an AVID, Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure, on all deals. I'm not an inspector, but I do have to give a visual inspection of the property. Well, there's a note section on there. I could note right on there. Seller told me he did an addition without permits. There it is. I've disclosed it. Now I'm off the hook, right? I've disclosed it. When that buyer decides to sue that seller for not telling him he did this, I told him he did it, that he didn't pull a permit, so they can try and sue me, but I disclosed it.
Right.
So that's what would happen and could happen. The next provision down here, government required and retrofit, right? I'm just saying the seller shall pay for smoke alarm and carbon monoxide devices. That's also a state mandated thing nowadays, okay?
Okay.
Sellers must have smoke detectors and CO detectors, carbon monoxide detectors in the house.
And that's another one of those boilerplate.
It is a plug and play boilerplate, but it is something that's absolutely required. And that's why I'm checking a seller shall put those in place before we close escrow.
Okay.
Now, the next provision on the next page, which is page 3, it talks about retrofit things. Okay, this is not as important down in Orange County because there's not properties that are 100 or 200 years old like LA County or so forth. If you were going to check seller shall pay compliance for mandatory government inspections, you would check those there. But I can tell you, you would probably get countered out. Most selling agents would counter out this 2 provision, 2I, 1, 2, and 3. They would counter that out because that their seller's not going to rebuild the house to 2020 standards if it was built in 1910.
Okay.
Next provision down here calls for escrow and title. You would check this box. Typically, you would have 2 X's in here, X here, X here, just stating buyer and seller shall pay escrow fee split 50-50, each pay their own. It's just stating that there are buyer costs for escrow and there are seller costs for escrow. Okay. And that if the total fee for the escrow is $4,000, $2,000 would be to the seller, $2,000 to the buyer. And we're just stating here, escrow holder shall be seller's choice. Typically on a selling, if you're representing a buyer, sellers usually pick which services they want. It's kind of customary. It's not required, but it's just kind of customary. Because a lot of times when you take a listing, you've already worked with the escrow company for a few weeks or the title company for a week or 2, picking up all the title interest on the property to make sure there's no clouds on title. You may have some things to take care of. I closed an escrow about a month ago that had a whole bunch of title issues that I had to work out that took 3 months to work out prior to me even coming on the market. So I had already an escrow company doing a whole bunch of work and a title company doing a bunch of work before I even had the property on the market or an escrow.
Wow.
So typically it's a customary thing that a seller gets to pick their escrow company and the next provision down, title insurance company. Okay.
Okay.
Other costs involved. The key one right here, this is the first one. Seller shall pay county transfer tax fee. That's documentary transfer tax with the county recorder, and that's calculated at $1.10 per thousand. $1.10 for every $1,000 that's transacted. That's how you calculate those fees. Sellers typically pay those fees.
Okay.
Tax. In this particular contract, if any, because I wasn't aware if that city had any, so I just wrote in here if I expect the seller to pay it.
Okay.
Next provision down is a very key provision, 3 and 4, especially if you're buying in a new housing tract or a condo tract. It says here, seller shall pay homeowners association transfer fee. You would check that box that the seller pays that. And seller shall pay HOA fees for preparation of documents. Okay, you would check that box also.
Okay.
Because if there's an HOA that governs the association, there's going to be an HOA that manages all of it. They're going to have CC&Rs, which are covenant conditions and restrictions. They're going to have HOA documents, rules, regulations, and those sort of things, budgets, minutes, all of that stuff.
Okay.
If I get down here, third-party building inspection. This is something you don't have to put in because I'll explain it in a minute why you don't have to. I'm just stating right now that my buyer is going to pay for one, right? But you don't have to put that in there, and I'll show you why you don't have to in a minute.
Okay.
10, I've just said seller shall pay the cost not to exceed $750 of an upgraded 1-year home warranty plan issued from this company, First American Home Warranty. That's just a home warranty because the seller is going to be telling the buyer everything in this house is working perfectly. Furnace is working great. The condenser for the AC is great. The garbage disposal is great. Systems are great in the house. So if something were to fail a month in, 2 months in, 3 months in, hot water tank, for example, blows up and he says it's fine and he replaced it 5 years ago, he may look for a remedy from that seller. If he has a home warranty in place, he calls the warranty company and said, I did an inspection. Everything was in working order when I did my inspection. Everything was fine. And now it broke. Come and replace it. So that's how that would work. And the seller usually would pay for that. If he's willing to say everything is in great working condition, he should warrant that by giving the buyer a warranty for a year.
Okay, so this is a common provision here?
Very common.
Okay.
Next one down is 8. B, the B provision calls out for things that are in the house, all stove, all refrigerator, all washer and dryer. Now, obviously a stove is a habitability issue thing. You have to have a stove in a house, you know, to be habitable, the same way a kitchen sink needs to be in there and windows. So the refrigerator and the washer and dryer, you don't need for habitability, but I've checked them here that I want them to stay. Now that's something that a seller doesn't have to agree to, but you certainly are putting him on, you're just putting him on notice that you would like them to keep those things in there. Stove, I would never relent on. Obviously the refrigerator and washer and dryer are more of ask items than anything.
So obviously, with this agreement, the seller can come back and say, well, you know what, these provisions I'm not cool with, so that we need to restructure the agreement here or the contract.
Yeah, they would,
right?
right. And they wouldn't ask us to restructure the contract. They would give us what would be referred to as an SCO, seller counter offer. So they would be saying, I'm agreeing to all of these things in this contract, except the things that we're referring to in the seller counter offer.
Okay.
The rest of it is boilerplate provision stuff. more boilerplate. Number 10 here, statutory and other disclosures. It's just stating all of the things that are disclosed. I mentioned this TDS to you a minute ago, real estate transfer disclosure statement. It shows that is going to be in there. It shows the natural hazard disclosure right there. That's a statutory disclosure, okay? And it also refers to this other form that I mentioned to you a minute ago, SPQ, which stands for Seller Property Questionnaire. Then it references it to more disclosure information, lead disclosure, more disclosure. Here's that SPQ mentioned again here at 4. And more disclosure, natural hazard environmental disclosure booklet, more disclosure, withholding taxes, more disclosure, Megan's Law database, more disclosure, notice regarding gas and hazardous liquid pipelines, more disclosure. We get down to F here, condominium planned unit disclosures. It says F1, seller has 7 days after acceptance to disclose to buyer if the property is a condominium or is located in a planned unit development. So within 7 days, he would send over disclosure to that fact.
Okay, Pat, what was the P and SPQ?
Seller Property Questionnaire.
Property. Thank you.
Yeah. More disclosure here. Condition of property. Here's something that's interesting here. that's defaulted into the contract. 11. Condition of property. Unless otherwise agreed in writing, the property is sold as is in its present physical condition as of the date of acceptance and subject to buyer's investigation rights. So the contract calls out and says, look, Mr. Buyer, what you see is what you get when you walk through this property. That doesn't negate the fact that he can do any disclosures he wants, a third-party building disclosure, a termite disclosure, a mold disclosure, a geological disclosure, whatever he wants to do. But it's just the contract that defaults and says it's really as is. You can do all of these inspections you want. And what's typical is after they do inspections, buyers come back to sellers and want repairs. Seller may not be aware of some things about his house that were kind of in a gray condition. So, but the contract does stay, it's as is, where is.
Okay, but they still would get that, I mean, at that point in time, they have to decide if they're going to remedy the situation or not, right?
Correct, they don't have to. Typically they do. It's like any negotiation. An inspector may find 20 things. Of the 20 things, 5 might be big things, or 15 might be like, you know, maintenance items. And so your buyer would go after, listen, there's 20 things that I could go back to you as Mr. Seller, but these 5 are very important to me. You should remedy those things.
Okay.
12, buyer's investigation of property and matters affecting title. This is something you want to read. It talks about termite inspections. It talks about buyer investigations. Basically all disclosure of things you should be aware of as a buyer. Title investing talks about a preliminary report right here on my cursor. A preliminary title report. That's one of the disclosures a seller will give you to show you that he is the rightful seller of the property. He has the capacity to sell the property. He has the ability to do that. And you'll also see if there's any other loans on the property or liens on the property that would affect him. That will show up there. Excuse me. Page number 6 is a key page. Talks about time removal of contingencies, inspection contingency, appraisal contingency, full loan contingency, all your inspection rights, right? Mm-hmm. And it says here at A, seller has 7 days after acceptance to deliver to buyer all reports, termite report, natural hazard disclosure, title, prelim. So the seller has 7 days to get me all of those documents to review them with my buyer. And at B1 here, it says the contract defaults to 17 days. I've written in here 10 days. We're going to do that a bit quicker here. But the contract defaults to 17 days. It says the seller has to give me all of the disclosures in 7. We have to do all of our due diligence within 17 days. That's key. This goes
So
to,
once you start doing a deal with somebody, you're back and forth with the buyer at this point in time, going through all these different things, right? In the contract to kind of like walk them through all the different information and help them to understand what's happening, correct?
100%. Day one, when I reach mutual agreement with one of my clients, I do what I call a contract date net sheet. So I take all the key dates in this contract and I put them into a spreadsheet, and I show them everything that's due to us, everything that's due to the seller. And I then further plug that into my Outlook calendar, and I have alerts going off. Last week we talked about a transaction coordinator, what they do. When a transaction coordinator is involved, that's their job to pay attention to all of these contract dates.
Okay.
I like to hold the hands of my clients a lot and stay in very close contact with them because I managed contracts for a long time. So I feel better about taking care of all of these things myself and staying on top of this.
Okay, but that could also be a transaction coordinator's job too, then, right? You're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
So then it just talks about removal of contingencies with the offer and what's involved with that. Like I said, contracts are performance and remedy driven. The performance is you do inspections, the remedy is you remove contingencies, and what happens there. You need to know this page very well. Page 6, you need to focus on a lot and learn it, know it, understand it. It talks about seller's right to cancel, seller's right to cancel, buyer's contract obligations. It talks about those things, and you need to go through those things. Notice to buyer to perform. So this is key. So if I get to a 17-day and I got to remove something, if he notices me, the contract says 2 days here. So if he notices me, I have 2 days after delivery of that to remove that, right? A lot of times you'll get that back and there'll be 24 hours in there. Talks about close of escrow here, effective cancellation of deposits, what that means. Basically, if the buyer was to materially breach the contract and the seller wants to go after that $25,000, escrow on page 6 here at H, it nets out, signed release escrow instructions from parties. Escrow is holding that money. They don't just routinely turn that $25,000 over to the seller if the buyer breaches the contract. There has to be a signed agreement between two parties saying, yes, I breached this contract for that money to be released. Now, if the buyer did 100% breach the contract, they would go after the money. But it just says escrow is not going to release it until they have mutual agreement between the parties and a signed release.
So the buyer and the seller both have to agree to this?
Correct.
Okay. Well, that must be kind of squirrely sometimes with the buyer going like, hold on a second, I didn't breach the contract, or you prove that I breached the contract, and that kind of litigation probably happens often.
Yes. Very much so.
Okay, makes sense.
15 here, final verification of condition of the property. So 5 days before we close escrow, 5 days in this case, we'd do a final walkthrough to make sure the property was in basically the same condition as the first time we saw it, the second time, the third time. The reason we do that is just in case 5 days before we close escrow, we go and verify the condition of the property and we find holes in the wall, doors ripped off the hinge, the stove removed, then we hold up the close of escrow until those items have been remedied. Next provision talks about repairs, prorations of property tax. That's a longer conversation, but you need to read that. Broker's compensation talks about this part of the contract, talks about representative capacity, just meaning what people can do, what the parties can do. Joint escrow instructions just notes that there'll be an escrow company engaged between all parties, and the escrow company holds all the documents to the deal. We get down to the next page, page 8, 21, and 22 are very key provisions. It talks about remedies for disputes in the contract, and it talks about liquidated damages. Whatever money that's in escrow, if this provision has been initialed here, and then the seller initials it also, up here it says 3%, that they cannot go after more than 3%, or the money they have in escrow, which could be 3%, it could be 20 grand, it could be 10 grand, whatever it is. That's the amount of money that they would go after. If they sign these, they're agreeing to that they're basically agreeing that they're not going to sue, that the money that's in escrow is the money they're going to go after as a material breach.
Okay.
That's 21 and 22. The rest of, yes, the rest of it in terms of page 9 is all boilerplate. Selection of services, multiple listing service, what that means, what attorney's fees are, assignment, equal housing opportunity, terms and conditions. Time is of the essence, talks about contract law. You got to pay attention. And here's all your definitions of the contract here, starting at 30. What does acceptance mean? What does agreement mean? CAR form, close of escrow, what does that mean? Copy. So it nets out to both parties what all of these things mean. And then page 9 here, we have buyer signatures, and page 10 is the agent capacity page. And then at the end of it, we get to buyer's inspection advisory. I went through that fairly quickly today, but I highlighted some of the key provisions about the deposit, the appraisal contingency, the full loan contingency, statutory disclosures that are required on all deals, NHD disclosure, termite reports. The big ones are around inspections and loans. Most of the people that you're going to be purchasing with are going to be procuring loans. You may get lucky and deal with some people that have $500,000 or $1 million in cash, and they're looking to park that in property. Most of the people that you'll be dealing with, though, will be getting loans. So you need to be intimately involved with the lenders and knowing the effect of shortening these provisions from 17 days and 21 days down to maybe 10 days and 15 days. You need to know what that means. It's holding your feet to the fire greater, and you just need to be fully aware of what that means if you cannot perform around those time frames. So you need to have a lot of security when you're writing contracts and knowing you can perform around those time frames.
Okay. Do you see, Matt, nowadays that in your 30 years of doing this, has it just become a situation where people just want to get this stuff done faster and faster?
In a very competitive market, 100%.
Okay.
If I'm writing a very competitive offer in a competitive market, I'm shortening my appraisal contingency from 17 days to 10 days. And I'm going to shorten my full loan contingency from 21 days down to 15 days. And a lot of the time, I'm going to shorten my escrow period down from 30 days to 21 days because I work with very experienced lenders that can perform very quickly. Okay. So I'm shortening a lot of these provisions. Certainly, the inspection contingency, meaning a building inspection for a buyer, the contract defaulted to 17 days that we went through. That I routinely shortened down to 10 days, but I'm getting countered in LA on deals right now, 7 days and 5 days. Wow. That's very difficult because, we can get it done. Obviously, if I call my guy today and he said, yeah, I can go tomorrow, that's 2 days. But, he's got to generate his report. He's got to send the report to me. We got to get comfortable with the report. It can be difficult. So we have to be aware of those timeframes that we can perform in the specific timeframes. Yeah, that makes sense. So with the RPA, when you're going through this with like first-time buyers, I mean, how efficient are you at, explaining all of the different things that are in that contract? I mean, a 10-page contract is a lot. You kind of zip through it today and you hit on the high points. But there's a lot of stuff. If I were a first-time buyer looking at this, there's so much information. This has to be kind of a little bit frightening for a first-time buyer looking at this going like, oh my gosh, there's so many things to be aware of. Right. I mean, what's the general sense of ethics amongst real estate agents when they're going through this? Because you would think that you want your client to feel as comfortable as possible so that they're not afraid of what all these different things might mean to them, how it can affect them. Again, as I'm getting into this industry and I'm thinking about this, ethically, there's got to be agents that probably like, don't worry about that. That's just like this. That doesn't mean anything. Here, just sign this right here, and then we're good and go on with it. You know what I mean? I mean, how common is that kind of sense of ethics? Yeah, well, lack of ethics, I mean. Lack of ethics, right? Well, the contract is a lot of boilerplate, like I mentioned, but it is performance and remedy driven. So you have to put your clients on notice what these provisions mean and the impact of these things. That's why I do a contract net sheet myself and send it to them with the key provisions noted, okay?
That's something you make for yourself, right?
I make it for myself and I send it to my clients and I say, look, all of these dates that I have on the sheet, I put into my Outlook. I'm going to be aware of it. I'm going to be letting you know this is due around this time. And I have alerts going off a week before, 2 days before, so that we're never late on things. And we need to be aware of it. This, you know, the contract giveth and it taketh. So we want to be aware of this. There's a lot in the contract that is just not overtly important, you know, but I mean, it's there for a reason. And it was there probably because of a lawsuit at some stage. So I'm not downplaying it, but there are some provisions in the contract that are way more important than others. And the financing is a huge part of it. And the inspections are a huge part of it. The disclosures are a huge part of it. Those are the most important things you'll be engaged with on a deal.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did go through it fairly quickly. We can do it again, key provisions, but you want to read that, know it. Focus on the high points and know what they mean and the performance and the remedy side of that.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll go through the video and I stop and look at some of the different provisions that we kind of glazed over and kind of get more of a handle on some of the things I might have questions about.
Yes, that's perfect.
I'll bring that up to you later and we can talk about that later.
Perfect. Yes, well, I got to jump back on my offers and deals today and cut it a bit short for today, but I'm glad we were able to go through that because it's the most important document you're going to be dealing with when you start to get actively engaged with this, whether you're on the listing side or the sales side. It's the primary driving document, so that's it. You need to know it like you know the back of your hand.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for all the information and your expertise. All right, everybody, thank you for hanging out with us. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. I'll talk to Pat. I think either if I go over, as I get a chance to go over the RPA, maybe we'll hit some of those points that I have questions about. And if not, we'll continue with the questions I think we're on questions from chapter 12 to probably like around, I don't know, 17 or so, something like that, 18. Depending on what's kind of in the curriculum at that point in time. So the real estate principles book for California. Anyways, thank you guys for hanging out. Pat, thank you so much. Have a great day. Good luck with everything today, brother.
You're welcome, sir. I appreciate it. I'll see you soon.
All right. Take care, Pat.
Bye.